Ebitda is earnings before tax, depreciation, amortization, and I should really know. I shouldn't say by now, but I don't. Basically, it it's a way of distilling down how your business is performing down to a number that is then able for you to then compare it with other businesses without having to know industries or specifics. And so it's really useful in terms of benchmarking and tracking your performance like quarter by quarter, which is what I recommend you do. And I know it's kind of a stock market kind of term, but I think it's useful to have this agnostic number that you're optimizing for, and you're growing over time, and it actually is allowing you to get towards the exit or whatever you're trying to get to. And I think balance sheets are important because I think a lot of people don't sit there and they're not thinking about things like stockable days, right? So days in stock. They're not thinking about supplier terms, right? But both in terms of what they own, what's owed to them. And I think if you're seeing six figures or seven figures, you live and die by how good the month is, essentially, because you may not have the level of credit or the cash flow that you need. And so by not optimizing how your balance sheet is on, like I say, a rolling 90-day process, it then becomes really difficult for you to say, well, actually, we're healthy, we're doing good long term, because you've got all these different things. So many small businesses live or die by accounts receivable. And if you're not monitoring that, and that's not being centrally kind of analysed every month, every couple of months, you will suddenly realise that somebody owes you 10k, and your wage bill for that month is 10k, and you don't actually have the money to pay, but you have the outstanding, right? So that's why, for me, balance sheets, P&Ls, EBITDA, all really matters, and it's not about ticking boxes. And I know when they come to KPIs in a minute, really, I think all of this stuff is important for you to measure and monitor as a holistic way of validating, do we have a healthy business? Are we moving in the right direction towards our goal and our vision? Absolutely.
And how often did you say you think you should be reviewing this as a business?
So I think EBITDA every quarter, because I don't think it's going to massively kind of change quarter by quarter. I think balance sheets, monthly, figuring out what stock you have, what accounts receivable you have, what accounts payable you have. If you do that every month, then hopefully you can have a better and more holistic view of, our P&L is one thing, and I think that's really important to have a day or weekly view of what your P&L looks like. But if you have a monthly view of what your balance sheet looks like, you can then start to say, well, actually, we need to forecast that the cash flow is going to be X, and therefore we've got this in account receivables. How are we going to actually collect that? What have we got out in? It always surprises me with e-com companies, and probably you as well, or both of you, where people don't know the value of their returns out in the market. And it's all these sorts of things that people don't think about and don't get smart about, right? And then there's somebody smart comes into the marketplace and obliterates them. I think your job as a founder and as a leader is not to sweat the small stuff. You have a team to do that, but to understand what the big picture looks like, to allow you to then make the bigger strategic decisions over what you're doing and how that all kind of factors, out into what other people are doing. I think if you don't have some of this data, you're not considering how this all looks, it then becomes very, very, very difficult to make rational decisions, because oftentimes it's easy for us to get very, very, very emotional about where the market is, but not very centered on what the data says. I think you have to marry the two. You have to have the internal data that says we're doing well, knowing that the market may be struggling, or maybe then there's a new competitor, or the market is picking up after a slow previous quarter. And so it's about trying to marry the hard facts with the softer, kind of more sociable skills that you may have, to allow you to build out something that's more holistic.
As a founder, you have to have that ability to zoom out, and also that is where sometimes an external consultant can help, because they've got a completely different perspective, haven't necessarily got the emotional ties that the founder might have, or know the history, the background, can come with a fresh perspective and kind of say, right, this is the direction you need to take, and you really need to be looking at this.
If you wanted to sell your business, I know, I was into better shape,
It's about trying to persuade somebody that there is value in what you created. And so for me, it's, do we have strong revenue? Do we have strong margins? And then it's about trying to reduce your stockable days, right? So that you've got good cash flow within your business, and being able to prove that because you track that, right? It's then about making sure that you have a healthy return rate, right? Financial health, process health, having a Bible or a library or documentation, right? Is always, and then having some sort of framework where you as the owner are able to be switched out without it being chaotic or traumatic to the team, the customers, but that you are the arbiter of the vision, the brand guidelines, and the finance and the ops, and that for me is what makes a business sellable.
Fantastic, thank you.
It's really interesting.
My pleasure.
Yep. Right, I'm going to move on to Anna now, and obviously Anna, that some of the businesses you work with, they're in a much earlier stage, aren't they? And you're talking all about measuring the right KPIs for your business stage, facing and actions. So
exactly,
moved on to talk about these bigger companies aiming for the exit. But when people are starting up and really getting going, obviously there's certain things that you really advocate they should be keeping an eye on in those first few months and years. Perhaps you'd like to talk us through some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, so I work with brands that are pre-revenue, haven't started selling yet, up to sort of tens of millions. So, and they're all looking at slightly different things, but there are a couple of things that do stick out that you will always be looking at. One of those, and especially when you're starting, is, so once you launch, I would keep a close eye on the conversion rate on your website, make sure that that's looking healthy. I'd be looking at your average order value as well to see how much customers are typically spending. Those are both things that you can impact yourself. So if your conversion rate isn't high enough, you can take action. You can take steps to increase that. And the same with average order value. There are ways to increase that to make sure and both of those will directly impact your sales. And then and after that, I would be looking at the amount of traffic that's coming through. Assuming you're paying for traffic, I'd be looking at the CAC, which is your customer acquisition cost, and you need to make sure that you're getting that back within a decent amount of time. And once you're sort of getting more established, then start looking at the customer lifetime value. You can obviously have an idea about what that is going to be at the start, and I would recommend having a plan or a goal for all of these KPIs. But the lifetime value is going to take a little while to come through, so you can actually see what your actual KPI is compared to what your goal was. And you need to have a plan for how much you're going to be able to sell, because that's going to impact how much stock you buy and how much stock you need to reorder. And then you're going to be looking at things like what you have versus, as AJ mentioned, what's really not selling, and have a plan for that, so you can so that you can make sure that you've got a healthy cash flow and that your business is succeeding. Keeping an eye on them and making sure it is a little bit like spinning plates. If you're starting a business from scratch, you won't necessarily know how much and what a healthy conversion rate is, what your customer average order value is likely to be, and how much you should be spending on marketing and all of these things. And then you can start. A consultant can help with that because like I've looked at loads of different e-commerce businesses, and there are patterns you can pick out, and there are clues that you can get from the business idea and the kind of products you're stocking and the price point and things like that. So yeah, there are ways to get a pretty good guess at where it's going to land. I think Shopify is brilliant for e-commerce. They've got a pretty good analytics tool. Google Analytics as well is useful to have. Use Excel or Google Sheets. Yeah, make sure you're sort of using the numbers that you have, and then manipulating them in the right way.
As they start going up into more established business with a six-figure turnover, what kind of things would then they start to be really looking at?
It really depends on the specific business and what the issues are that they're facing. I tend to come in and look at all of the KPIs to start with and start working out, okay, where are the issues? Is it that they need, if all of the on-site, so the conversion rate and AOV, for example, if those are looking really healthy, then maybe it's just that we need to get more traffic. And then it's looking at ways that we can do that. Or it might be that they're getting sales through, but they've really got sort of areas of stock that just aren't moving, or like sales have slowed, and it's about how digging into that really and analysing, looking at why, and then coming up with a plan of action. So the 80-20 rule is just about so 80% of your it can be used in, but quite often the smallest sort of action is going to impact the biggest part of your business if you can just work out what that action and that big part of the business are. So so number one is finding out what is that, and then two is just acting on that. It is tempting to be measuring absolutely everything, and I've certainly worked with very big retailers that have, we spent an entire day just reporting on things that actually doesn't matter and nobody really cares about. And I would definitely advocate having regular trading meetings. If you're just starting out, sometimes a weekly trading meeting isn't going to give you that much. So it might be like once every 2 weeks or once a month. And then once you scale, I think a weekly meeting is a good idea. And try and keep it to the really core KPIs to start with, and then if there's anything there that is not going to plan, those are the ones that you should dig into. Don't look at absolutely every single data point you have, and then try and pick out, because it's like you can't see the wood for the trees in that case. Founders generally have a really good gut feel for their business, so quite often that can be. And it might be acting on, we think this is happening, and we think this is the reason, and then I'll try and find some data to sort of support or support that argument or not, as the case may be. A really successful business will have returning customers, absolutely. When you're brand new, you're not going to have that many of them, but you do want to set up the right circumstances so that you do have returning customers in the future. At the beginning, it's just about making sure that you've got you've got a really good customer offer. You've got products that customers will come back for, or you're introducing new products in the range that customers will want to come back for. That you're, like, just on a really basic level, that you're capturing customer email addresses and you are contacting them semi-regularly in whatever sort of schedule works for your business, just to make sure that they sort of still know about you, don't forget about you, and in marketing terms, to keep the leads warm. So you've got that side of it, and then once you get bigger, then obviously returning customer retention is going to be a very big part of your business, because it's much more. It's much, as we all know, it's much easier to sell to someone who has bought from you before than someone who has never met you or heard of you.
I think retention is a wonderful thing if you can do it right, and I think a lot of brands that just focus on email are part of the way there. I think you need to be doing things like, experience days for your VIP customers, direct mail. I think text or WhatsApp can also work very, very well. I think, like with the emails, I think what you need to do is get opt-ins. So
I was just going to say, just based on following on from what I just said, I think it really is a balance. You don't want to be emailing. You don't want to email people every day with nothing to say. If you're just, that's just going to put people off. So you do need a content strategy in terms of the email, and automations are a massive part of that.